Would you dare to bathe with hundreds of strangers completely naked? Because that's exactly what the Romans did. Every day, Roman baths were impressive at first glance. They were grand structures, clad in marble, with monumental columns and precisely planned spaces. At first sight, they almost looked like temples dedicated to cleanliness. The marble walls were swallowed by a deafening noise. Shouting, laughter, political debates, grunts of physical exertion, and the constant sound of water being stirred by bodies. Lots of bodies, naked, sweaty, slippery, crammed together. Few people imagine this, but the legendary public baths of Rome were far less refined spas, and much more like a chaotic marketplace where everyone was naked, literally. But what looked at first like a sanctuary of luxury hid a much more chaotic reality. Roman public baths were, above all, a social spectacle. People didn't go there just to get clean. In fact, hygiene was almost an excuse. The real reason: to see and be seen, to talk, to listen, to spy, to negotiate, to seduce. Get ready to discover a rarely told side of the empire, where marble and chaos went hand in hand. Because what comes next will shatter everything you thought you knew about Roman baths. The journey through the Roman baths began with a challenge that, for many, was already a risky experience in itself. The changing room. Called the apodyterium, this space was, in theory, a simple place to store your clothes before bathing. In practice, an arena of opportunism. Clothing theft was so common it became a joke in the literature of the time. You'd leave your tunic folded in a corner, and when you came back, only the cold stone and the breeze of embarrassment remained. The wealthy, of course, had their own tricks. They brought slaves just to guard their belongings, a kind of ancient private security. But if you thought the bath started with water, you were way off. Before any immersion, it was time for the palestra, an open courtyard where bathers engaged in intense physical exercise. Picture this: dozens of sweaty bodies running in circles, throwing balls, wrestling, engaging in hand-to-hand games, all under the hot sun. The goal? To sweat. A lot. Yes, the Romans believed that sweating was a fundamental part of the cleansing process. The more you sweated, the purer you became. Does it make sense? Maybe not, but that was the ritual. After the sweating, the running, and, if you were lucky, not having your clothes stolen, the real ritual began. But forget any idea of a simple bath. The Roman circuit was almost a physical endurance test. It all began in the tepidarium, the warm room, a place of transition. The environment was welcoming, with walls heated from below thanks to the ingenious Roman heating system. The hypocaustum. There, the body adjusted to the heat and tongues began to loosen. It was in the tepidarium that the true social spectacle began. Politicians negotiating alliances, poets reciting verses, and even spies whispering secrets under their breath, disguised in the light steam. All while naked, oil-slicked bodies lounged across the warm stone benches. From the tepidarium, you were led to the caldarium, the dreaded hot room. Very hot. Steam filled the air, making it hard to even breathe. Inside, a pool bubbled with near-boiling water, and the walls dripped with condensation. And yet, everyone went in. Why? Because they believed that extreme heat purified, eliminated disease, strengthened the body and even the spirit. Sweat poured, muscles loosened. The most ambitious stayed as long as they could, testing their limits. But then came the real shock. Literally, the final stage of the circuit was the frigidarium, the cold room. And cold here is an understatement. Imagine stepping out of scalding steam and plunging, without warning, into a pool of icy water, often exposed to the open sky, with cutting wind biting your skin. It was a brutal thermal shock, enough to take the breath away from even the toughest legionnaires. And guess what? They loved it. The Romans believed that this abrupt transition between hot and cold brought vigor, endurance, even mental clarity. It was almost a bodily philosophy, to subject oneself to extremes in order to achieve balance. But the most curious part is that, up to this point, no one had actually washed themselves, because bathing, in the sense we know today, hadn't even begun. Instead of soap, the Romans used a peculiar technique of their own. They would cover the entire body in perfumed olive oil. That's right, a dense, oily layer applied from head to toe, not just to loosen dirt, but also as a symbol of care and status. The more aromatic, the more sophisticated the citizen. But the real cleansing came from an instrument, the strigil, a curved blade made of bronze or iron, used to scrape the oil from the body, along with sweat, dust, dead skin, and anything else stuck there. The process was vigorous, sometimes painful, and done right there, in the middle of the steam and the stairs. Now, here comes the part nobody told you in history books. All that scraped off bodily residue, that sticky, dark mixture of oil and impurities, had a name and a purpose. It was called gloio, and it accumulated on the floors of the baths like a human sludge, viscous and shiny. That's no exaggeration. Some ancient texts describe gloio as something that oozed into corners, stuck to everything, and had to be removed daily. But the strangest part, gloio was valued. Slaves would carefully collect it, and believe it or not, it was used in medicines and cosmetics. That's right, some people would apply it to their skin as a form of rejuvenation or even as a cure. In the Roman mind, what came out of the body could also heal, or bring wealth, or at the very least be sold. Between one scrape of the strigil and another, social life boiled, because the baths weren't just places to purify oneself. They were the beating heart of Roman social life. There, all social classes mingled. Senators, merchants, soldiers, craftsmen, philosophers, gossipmongers. All naked, all sweaty, all sharing the same space. It was a place where social barriers melted as quickly as sweat dripped down the hot stones. And the most impressive part, it all functioned like a giant stage of interaction. In the steamy corridors and damp halls, deals were made, alliances forged, favors exchanged, and of course, rumors spread. Politics happened there, between a boiling pool and a cold water bucket. And often, decisions that changed the fate of entire cities were born amid the steam. And it wasn't just about conversation. Many bathhouses had libraries, where people read between dips. In others, musicians performed live, accompanying the murmurs of the water with lyres and flutes. Some even featured small theaters and impromptu recitals, a kind of daily cultural festival with everyone completely naked. And of course, there was the forbidden side, the part that made Roman moralists tear their hair out. Mixed bathing between men and women caused scandals. Roman conservatives demanded gender separation. Laws were passed, decrees were signed. In practice, these laws were widely ignored. Men and women continued to share spaces, especially in more liberal cities. Romantic encounters, flirtations in disguise, and even sexual scandals in the steam of the caldarium were far from rare. The mix of eroticism, politics, and public life turned the bath into a chaotic spectacle where anything could happen and usually did. But all that freedom came at a price, because along with bodies, diseases were also shared. Many diseases, the pools, no matter how grand they looked, were actually living broths of body fat, oil residue, and accumulated grime. The water was rarely changed, and the result? Slippery surfaces covered in a shiny, visibly dirty film floating on the hot water. In this damp, stifling environment, lice, fungi, and parasites spread easily. Skin infections were as common as greetings between citizens. Athlete's foot, scabies, open wounds, and inflamed eyes passed from one body to another with an efficiency that would make any modern doctor lose sleep. And as if that weren't enough, the cleaning tools were shared too. Strigils, towels, and cloths passed from hand to hand without any kind of disinfection. One scratch was all it took to open the door to something more serious. But the peak of Roman unhygienic habits was still to come. The baths often had attached latrines, where bathers would relieve themselves before or after the thermal circuit. And there, next to each seat, was the infamous tersorium, a vegetable sponge attached to a wooden stick. Simple and communal. After being used, it was dipped into a bucket of water, sometimes salted, sometimes not, and returned to its place, ready for the next user. No soap, no replacement, no clue. This was the sanitary standard of a civilization that built aqueducts, paved roads, colossal arenas and thought it was completely normal to share a toilet sponge with strangers, and yet they left the baths feeling clean. After all that, hours of sweating, scraping, plunging, and sharing absolutely everything. The Roman bath ritual reached its final stage: eating. Yes, many would end the day sitting side by side at taverns and stalls located in or around the bathhouses. Bread, cheese, olives, wine, all served amid laughter, heated discussions, and stories about what had happened in the steaming pools or vapor rooms. And the most curious part, often you'd be dining with the same person whose back you scraped 20 minutes earlier, or with whom you shared the latrine sponge. But no one seemed to mind. Everyone was there, clean, or rather, feeling clean, and completely up to date on the latest city gossip. Because more than hygiene, the baths offered something the Romans valued above all else: belonging, spectacle, and a daily dose of chaos. They were a raw portrait of Rome itself, an empire that turned the most intimate, everyday act into a public spectacle. Now, I want to hear your thoughts. If Roman baths were reopened today, do you think they'd be a hit? What part surprised you the most? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story and want to see more epic content like this, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel. In the video on your screen, we reveal how Roman soldiers dealt with the lack of bathing during long marches.